So hi everyone, as Professor Eric said, I'm a PhD student here. My program is Economics of Education. My whole background is economics. I'm in my third year, and basically I think I've been working on this research for a while. For now, we're gonna see I only have like some initial results, but overall I think this project has like a lot of like different nodes and possibilities to go on. So all the comments are more than welcome. This project I'm working basically with Professor Eric, also with Professor Guilherme, and Gustavo is also helping from like the Inep side, and also have like Maria on the project itself, or Ari. So basically this project is kind of like trying to understand a bit better what is happening in terms of like applications from high achieving students, because we know that like public universities in Brazil, they are highly selective, but they have a very limited number of seats. So probably a good amount of high achieving students, they are not applying for these colleges or not even having like the possibility to access them. And also like our hint, it's probably that low income students are usually the ones that are more vulnerable in this case, since when you look like from some data, we can see that usually the people that are attending higher education in Brazil are people from high income families, white, and usually they have like college educated parents. So the idea here, we kind of want to understand what is happening in the application process for these students. So we want to see if these students are applied differently from like high income students, for example. Just to give you some ideas of how like the literature is positioning on that. Basically, we have like three main barriers that we can mention. Financial constraints, which usually like in Brazil is a bit tricky because we know that public university are free of charge, free of tuition. But like when you think about the US, even like if you're going to the public, the price is like low than like the private, but it still like it's something that matters. But when you think of Brazil, we can think about the moment of attendance that you know that people need some support and scholarships to keep their studies going on. Then we have like the informational and behavioral side, which probably like our work is going to be more situated in this field, which basically is related with the idea of low-income students usually don't necessarily like have access to enough information on how to apply and how to pass through the whole process of vestibulares in Brazil, and can like make them like be a step behind than high income students. And also academic constraints related in what are you learning before enrolling in a higher education institution. It can also like have like a negative effect on the perspective of the students like keep going with their programs. So one of the main works that have kind of like tried, not a more descriptive work, but try to put some light on this topic is the work from Rockley and Avery from 2013. And they show that there's a high correlation between like this meeting one-offs, which is basically this high achieving low income students, and being from a disadvantaged background. So they are like situated geographically in regions that usually like the traditional ways that applying for like a selective college in the US are not able to achieve them. And also they mentioned other interesting thing that, for example, if in the school that the student is enrolled doesn't have any professor that had the opportunity to study in a very selective college, usually it also like also reduce the probability of the student like engaging in a good school. So I think as in any literature, you're gonna see that there's like good and not necessarily like bad interventions, but some more like effective and less effective interventions. Here I'm showing like three interventions that kind of like had success in bringing more these low income students for enrolling and also like attend and then persist in higher education. The first work is from Professor Bettinger. Basically, it is like a combination of assistance and information about like the FAFSA, which is basically like an aid offered by the federal government, from the US federal government, that students can receive an aid to support them during college. Also, like Roxby and Turner did like a similar work, also like providing the live information for students about the cost, the curricula, what the profile of the student go, and also like future outcomes in terms of labor market. And they also show it has like a positive correlation with like an impact on students like enrolling and also on graduation rates. And this last work, which I think is very interesting, thinking about Brazil, since we know that for the federal system that we will get in more details later, you have the Sisu, which is basically a centralized system that you apply for college. This work kind of like try to understand what is happening in Chile. And basically they show that beliefs are very important during the admission process. So what is happening is that when students like are overconfident, they usually don't interact and using the system enough to really get the best match for them. And if you provide some, they are using like a smart matching platform that helps the students increase the research and possibility of programs they apply, and they show that at the end, like the students can get like in better programs and better have a better fit than before. On kind of like the downside of the literature, these two work from Grants in Florida, they kind of show that trying like to reduce barriers in terms of like what kind of information you need to provide during the application, and also trying to help in terms of like scholarship. They show that only like providing only information is kind of like a bit different from the previous case. That's like is information, but also assistance with the students. They don't find like any positive effects in terms of attendance or even like enrollment back for the students. So I think most of you are already like familiar with the Brazilian like education system, but just to explain a bit more, what happens usually like every student in the last year of high school, they can apply, they have to take an entrance exam. Usually if you're using like for federal university, you have to take the ENEM with like the federal level entrance exam that exists in Brazil. And based on the grade, on the score that you have on the name, the students are ranked. And if you have like a position above the threshold or the cutoff for enrolling on the program, you get in. Otherwise, you go like to a wait list, or you have like to wait for the next year to try again. So just trying like to put this in a process. First, they shouldn't have to decide, I'm going like to apply or not applying. Unfortunately, like you can look exactly for this moment right now, but then we are going to this moment 2 and moment 3, which is basically like the application. So the moment that the individual like are selecting the university and program they want to apply, and then see if this student is enrolling or not on the program. We also have like the moment 4 and 5 that we are interested to look to that, but we're not going to have like results for to show you that in this part, which basically like attendance. So it's understand the persistence of the student in the program and the university, and also future like labor markets outcome. Given like the student decide to follow medicine instead of engineering, what like the effects and the potential outcomes they're gonna have like in labor market in the future. So just some important definitions. Why like we're looking for an aim is the national entrance exam in Brazil. You have like access to several like federal public higher education institutions. Around 3 million students takes the exam every year. And this number also like achieve like 5-6 million in previous years. Sisu is basically the centralized system that student uses their name score, as I mentioned, to apply. And here we are gonna looking there, like we are kind of trying to get a definition what's high achieving students. In our case, we are defining as students that like scores at or above the 90th percentile in the ENEM exam. So like the top 10% students on the exam. And the university, initially we are basically like ranking the university based on the average score. For example, so we have like the Federal University of São Paulo that have a score of like 900, and the University of Rio that had like 700. So University of São Paulo is going to be first, followed by University of Rio. So the data that we are combining here are using like three main data. First, the ENEM, as we said, that because basically then we have all the socioeconomic information about the students, followed by the Sisu, which basically like is the place that we can look for the placement of students and also program choice. So if they get in, if they are rate listed, what are like the decision during this part. And also the higher education census, that the idea is to see if the student are enrolled or not, and is attending the university. The period that you're initially looking is only for like the, we call like the 2016 Sisu, because it was like there's no like major changes in university application process. As we know, before that it was created like the affirmative action in Brazil. Also, FIES happened in Brazil. ProUni has an expansion. So like 2026, kind of like this thing was kind of like stable growth. Oops. So as I mentioned, we have like that 5 different moments. And basically here, we're gonna show you like some results for moment 2, the application, and later for moment 3, the enrollment. So the basic regression we are usually using here is where our dependent variable AS is a dummy, because one is like the individual applied or not for a selective college. And as I mentioned, like we ranked the college based on the average score, 0 otherwise. And the variables that you are most interested in here, it's like is the age A. It indicates that the individual is like a high achieving student or not, is also a dummy. LI is also like a dummy to indicate if the individual is low income or not. And P is also a dummy indicating if the individual is student in a public school or not. So the individual studying in a public school is equal to 1, otherwise equal to 0. We also like control for many like socioeconomic characteristics like parents' education, gender, age, race. And basically here for enrollment, it's kind of like the same idea of regression. The only difference is our dependent variable, in this case, like is enrollment. So ES is equal to 1 if the individual like enrolls in the selective college, and 0 otherwise. And I think the variable that we're most interested in here is like this beta 4. It's like the interaction of being like a high achieving student and low income, and also beta 6, which like being high achieving, low income, and coming from like a public school. So here we have like the results for moment 2 application. So overall, what you can see here, yeah, it exists like a negative correlation from being a low income and high achieving student. And also like if you're from a public school, you add like a later burden on like, and in terms of applying or not for like a topper selective college. And as you can see, all the results kind of like statistically significant, but they're not for now like most interesting in terms of like the magnitude of the effects. So we're going to improve some of these regressions. Yeah.
So what is the sample? So the dependent variable is whether you applied to one of these top,
yeah,
right? But what the sample is all applicants to colleges in the country?
Sorry, I forgot to mention that. We're basically looking for students that like just finished high school.
So this is a sample of people who finish high school.
Yeah, but we are limiting for the students that are like in the transition moment. You know, like they're not looking for someone that 30 years old and is applying, but mostly for people that are between 17 and 19, it's kind of like the window in terms of people like finishing high school in Brazil. That's the group that we're looking.
So you say that you consider the top 10%, top 10% after the exam?
Yeah, yeah. Basically like get the score and see like with like in the extreme of like the tail in terms of like results on the
Before they
test.
apply,
Where the sample?
No, but like
Where the sample come from?
the sample comes from the students that like did an exam and then like we go to Sisu, and for the individuals that use the Sisu platform and applying there,
Oh.
from there we have like their score. We don't like using any like kind of like previous information to classify if they are top 10 students. It's basically based on their score, we are classifying them.
So this is a platform that students use to apply to university?
Yeah,
And is it widely used?
yes, because for most of the federal universities, you always have to use this platform. Like just for some courses, sometimes like for medicine, you can apply for some seats through Sisu, and also you can do like a specific test for the university. But for most of the programs, you're gonna use this platform. If
The
you,
whole institute, federal institute.
yeah, for the federal
Oh.
institutions.
So this platform is used to apply to federal institutions?
Yeah,
Not state universities?
State.
some positions.
Yeah.
And it changes from time to time, like
most-
Private universities?
private universities, no.
Then
Most
most,
only people who apply to public universities.
Yeah. Only public university.
Main
Yeah.
clarification, like if I did poorly on the exam. And so I don't think I have a chance. Do I still log into Sisu or you won't see me there?
We have like the data from these individuals, but since like we are basically like for the top, it's kind of like, but yeah, you can apply and use this system if you do poorly on this exam. The only thing that will like prevent you of applying or not, if you have like score 0 in one of the exams, which basically not going, or in terms of like the written test, it's basically like if you not like adjust the way that you write for related with the team, or if you like practice any like for example racial discrimination on your text, any type of discrimination on your text, then you can have like a 0 score. Otherwise, you have like the right to use your score and apply it to the system.
So can I ask the question differently? So how many total public universities use this platform?
I think around 100, 150, looking for the public universities.
So about 150, so to apply to about 150 universities, you would use this platform.
Yeah,
You're saying either the top 10 or the top 25. So out of 150. So this is a sample that's restricted to people who apply to a public university, as restricted to 150 public universities.
yeah, it's restricted for the 150 universities, but like we have like all the universities here. The only difference, like for example, we have like one university that's not that competitive. So if the individual apply for this university, you have like 0 for like in terms of for dependent variables here. Since we're kind of like saying like what is the selective colleges are the one that the highest score. The universities are here, all like the 150, but the main difference, like you have one only like if you apply for the top 10 or top 50, top 25.
So since there are 27 states, each one has the top university, has a federal university considered the best federal university in the state. Right?
Yeah, but at the same time, for example, if you
I
look
understand,
to,
yeah. But you're excluding a couple of those, even when you get to 25.
I see what you're saying.
So you're basically, you have, I didn't see a variable in terms of whether you applied in state or out of state.
Yeah, I could include that. Yeah, I'm not using that.
That's important, because most, I would say, even in the United States, most people apply to colleges and universities which are near them. I mean, it's a very, I don't know what it is.
The state fixed effects, so she pick up whether they're from there, I mean, in some sense, it's a different outcome, right? And whether you apply to one out of state versus in-state. So the state fixed effects in this regression should pick up, you know, the propensity of somebody from Sao Paulo to apply to college in general. I think what you're advocating, what you're advocating is a different outcome, which is, did you apply to a college within your state?
Well, I mean, but it does tell you something, I mean, in order to increase your chances, I would guess, then it would be better if you're just applying to the top university in your state, you're limiting yourself, right? So it says something about you in terms of what risk you're willing to take, or what kind of application functions. It seems to me that in the United States, if you don't, or you really differentiate between people who are willing to go out of state or away from home or not.
Yeah.
In Russia, it's huge. The women, for example, tend not to apply to universities outside of their locality, much more so than men. You have gender in here?
Yeah, gender, yes. There's a paper that discussed that what happened like after creating the Sisu system in terms of like people like going and applying for different states. There's some effect, but it's kind of like small. And what mainly the paper discussed, what happens like usually like we see like a transition like of people like median income and high income people like getting like these positions on this local universe, these different local universities, and then like the bottom ended up like going to like private institutions and like less selective colleges. But that usually happens. But I think then it's like I agree with Eric, kind of a different outcome, and then maybe the state fixed effects is trying to already like controlling for that.
Gabriel, I think the Martin's point is good in that, you know, if there's like this measure, this outcome, did you apply to one of the best schools is one outcome, but you know, most people when they're like college advisors, when they're talking about college application behavior, there's levels of sophistication. A lot of times they'll say, you know, apply to one of the best schools, apply to a medium school, apply to a safe school, right? And so it might be that there's ways that we can characterize the set of schools that they apply to in, you know, how many they applied to, how many were in state, you know, whether they applied to a high and a low to, you know, kind of hedge their bets.
Okay.
Just to kind of get an idea of whether there's some sophistication, because it might be that the applications behavior for the top ones are actually good because they're famous, but the applications that are a little bit more safe and think about a balanced portfolio are actually even worse for high achieving low income students because they don't understand that they can't put up, you know, everything, all their bets on this one application.
Okay.
And the other danger, I think, you're wrong, is that the coefficient of low income might be measuring in far distance from these, outcomes.
Sorry, measuring what?
What?
Measuring what?
Distance. So if you come from a small city in the state where there is no good university, you're more likely to be low income. Then, particularly this set of students is more likely to be more low income than if you're living in the main metropolis.
Okay.
So I'm just nervous that this coefficient is not only picking up low income, it's picking up distance because you're restricting the set of universities. That's the problem.
Just one other question. So when you have this university, 10% high achieving and low income, do you also have the data what we can find? Because we can identify symptoms of excellence in the public system. It's the different numbers and everything. So you can also get some kind of, what is 10% low income control?
Yeah, we have data to characterize these students. But one thing that we also want to do in like in a second moment, basically looking to the basic education census and then like really know what the school they attend. Because from the ENEM data that we're using here, if I'm not wrong, like to kind of like know if like a public or private and kind of classified like is municipal, state or federal level, this could be individual or private, the student like came from, but I'm sorry, like the name of the school, but it can be like something that you can look in a second moment. But anyway, like we're also like controlling for some characteristics that tries to, at some sense, get exactly like this potential uh benefits or not, let's say like that, like the individual being like from coming like from like a house that both parents have like higher education degree and also like other things.
What percentage of the samples is low income?
I need to recheck that, but if I'm not wrong, it's around like 25% of the sample.
You know, the technology that you could was do a dot diagram of where these people are,
On
you know, in each state. Because if you're gonna do it in your next step, I know that you give an incentive for some state, right? To give it information. And so, well, if you could be selective, I would say you're giving information to somebody who's far away or reason quite far away from one of these top universities. It's going to be less effective than giving information on incentives for people that are close to it. So it would be nice to know, just from a data standpoint, is where these people are, so that you can do a differential incentive. Eric is famous for differential incentive. I mean, you give an incentive to one group, and see if it has a bigger effect than another.
Should keep going so we can see.
Okay, but anyway, with the low, let's comment about the low income. I'm gonna mention later. But it also like thinking using like a socioeconomic index that we think that's gonna be like a better indication to the economic status of the individual, since like this low income variable stuff declared by the students kind of like can have like other problems here. And then in terms like of enrollment, so like condition of these students applying or not for the selective college, now we're looking if they are like enrolling or not. And similar what the literature shows, like we can see that we don't have any clear and exact like effect and path here. Kind of like, so kind of like give more some evidence and the idea that the main problem is in the application moment, and others are like on enrolling, like given that the student apply, they will probably enroll. We still have like some negative effects, but then like mostly like related when the students also come from like a public school, when you're only controlling like for only like combining being a high achieving low income student, the results are not necessarily like significant and also like positive, but it's kind of like very close what like the literature shows in terms of like the main problems like in the application moment, not necessarily like on the enrollment. So this is basically like the first two results that we get from there. And in terms of next steps, first thing we want to discuss a bit more is the moment one, kind of like decision. So before doing any kind of like intervention in the future, we want to kind of like talk with the students in terms of like we're going to apply a survey from high school students from Campinas in the São Paulo state to better understand what are exactly the limitations. Kind of like the literature points out like a number of like things that can affect their decision to apply or not. But like before like going to an intervention moment, the idea here is kind of, okay, let's look to Brazil and try to give it, when we know that we're basically looking to Campinas and São Paulo, but kind of give like some hints what like the main problems that exist. And basically this survey is gonna be divided like in 4 parts. First part, basically socioeconomic questions to kind of try to characterize the groups. Then we ask questions about like their future, so what they're thinking, like a next step after high school, maybe just getting a job or like going to college or even like applying for the army. 3, how they're planning their future. So if they are like already visit any college institution, they are taking prep exams and also support in terms of school and family. And last, kind of like the choices and how like they kind of like frame at some level their decisions. So just to give you an example, of course, like the survey here is in Brazil, but one of the questions like, since you got into the high school, how many times did you have you done like any of like these things? So for example, did you, as I mentioned, did you take like any prep exam? Have you ever visited any higher education institutions? And then they classify this like never, 1 or 2 times, or like more than 3 times. Just to get a sense like how these individuals like are preparing themselves to go to college. And in terms of like the results that I show you of like for moment 2, kind of 3, 4, and 5, like what are you gonna do next? First, the socioeconomic index to deal with like the low income variable. Use other rankings to classify the universities and also like the programs. So Inep has their own rank. We know that like the news Folha de São Paulo newspaper from Brazil also have like their own like way of ranking the universities. Thinking like in the moment 3, which is basically like the attendance, kind of like evaluate the relationship of like being a high achieving, low income, and attendance or not. What we know, kind of like the literature shows, usually also related with enrollment, then we don't see more any effects. Again, like the problem is mainly on the application moment. For the moment 2, 3, and 4, again, kind of like redo the analysis, but now at the program level, and also focus on some like most competitive programs like medicine, engineer, and law, for example. And for the moment 5, since like this first part that you show, it's kind of like more this more descriptive analysis, kind of to get into like the casual side. We want to understand potential effects on labor market outcomes, given like their choices of program they decide to apply. And we're kind of like following this methodology from 2026. And that's it.